What's going on, y'all? We got Ep2 of the second season. Let's Be Real podcast, man. Look, got a lot to cover. We obviously had week 1 of the NFL in the books. We just had Thursday night football last night. Big game there. And obviously, we got a couple really big games coming up this weekend. So we're going to get into it, man. Look, as always, you know how we like to start it. We got the wine, so something a little different this time, man. So today I got Seaward. It's a Chenin Blanc from South Africa. So went with a white wine today, man. So really, actually, really good. I was feeling a little white wine because I had some lobster, and so this paired really well with it. Look, really fruit forward. You get like some tangerine, some citrus, some pear towards the end. Really crisp and dry. So if you're looking for something, if it's still a little warm out, this is a really great wine to do it. You're having some seafood, really great wine for it. Yeah, I definitely recommend it. Definitely for the price point really well. It's about $20. Really good wine for that. Really good wine. And so, man, look, with that, I'm gonna sip on that as we go through this whole episode. But we're gonna get into it, man. We're gonna get into it. And so week 1, man, look, where we're gonna start. We're gonna go with my squad. We're gonna start with the Eagles and the Cowboys. And so look, man, couple different ways to look at it. And so looking at this game, it really, I feel like you can look at it one of two ways, right? Either the Cowboys are a lot better than we thought, or the Eagles aren't as good as we thought. And for me, this is a case of the latter. And it's not even so much that they're not as good as I thought. I think it's kind of what I assumed coming into this year, at least at the beginning, is with so many losses on that defense, um, you know, I thought we would have trouble rushing the QB. I thought we'd have trouble covering in the secondary. And look, the Cowboys, for as bad as they are, as bad as I think they are, one of the things they do have is a quarterback who can sit back there and deal if he's got time. And they've got an incredible wide receiver and then a solid number 2 option. And look, if you're the Eagles, man, we come out of there with the win, but you can't feel good about that win. I mean, Jalen, absolutely amazing game. Absolutely amazing game. We don't win that without Jalen. But when you look at it, man, I mean, not a great day rushing the ball outside of Jalen. Not a great day passing the ball. Defense got carved up in the back. And I mean, look, CeeDee Lamb comes down with 1 or 2 of those catches that he's more than capable of making, one of which is no excuse, not even more than capable of making. It should have been made. And, you're looking at a whole different game here and a whole different outcome. And so from that aspect, I think, kind of what I expected defensively from the Eagles. I thought that it was going to be tough. You needed a lot of guys to step up who are, getting a lot more reps than they normally would. And so, and look, you even saw the Eagles. They go out, they bring in, I believe, Mike Hilton, who is a veteran cornerback, bring him in for a workout. Just trying to find something for that second DB spot, which is clearly just a moment of, or clearly just a weakness in that team right now. And so for me, this is kind of worrisome for the Eagles because, like I said, this was a worry I had coming into the year, and it was only more solidified by a team that I don't think is very good. And then you got to also look at it from the Cowboys' point of view, man. Unless their, running attack really took drastic steps forward this year, which I don't think it did, Eagles' defense against the run wasn't great. I mean, just the defense as a whole this last week in week 1 is very worrisome. And so definitely something we need to keep an eye on moving forward. And sticking with that, man, look, Jalen Carter obviously kicked out of the game at the beginning. Inexcusable. Absolutely inexcusable. And, came down. He was going to get a 1-game suspension, which serves as the game he was kicked out of, which to me is a little funky. I mean, it's what it is. He did miss the entire game. But to me, this is just again, and y'all know how I feel about the head coach of the Eagles, but it's just in any team, organization, corporation, whatever it is, you're the leader of whatever you do. The tone they set is the tone that, whether it's workers, players, whatever, they feel is acceptable. And so, look, we've all been in jobs where we think, let's say, the manager is lazy, and if we have a manager who is consistently shows us how lazy they are, then naturally what we're going to do is assume we can be lazy, right? Like, I can be a little bit lazier because the manager's lazier. Well, in the same sense, when your head football coach is extremely immature, a hothead, and can't really control his emotions and his actions, as we've seen time after time with this head coach, well, then what do you think the players are going to expect they can do? And so you put a player like Jalen Carter, who has had issues previously to the Eagles and throughout his career, you put him with a coach who has issues and immaturity issues, and you get what you saw in week one. I don't think it's a coincidence that, you know, we haven't I haven't seen a guy been spit on in the NFL ever. And to me, it's not a coincidence that the guy who's coaching the Eagles happens to be, the head coach of a team where that's happened. Um, yeah, again, it's just completely inexcusable. And, it's, I know I've reached out to a couple people about this and said that, and they said it's unfair to Sirianni, but I'll bring it this way. How many times have we seen coaches where, well, I'm going to use Belichick for an example, right? Who has had players who have had serious attitude issues off the field. But when they're on that field, you would never have assumed that they had issues off the field, because that team is buttoned up because he demanded that team be buttoned up, because if you weren't, you were gone, and he had no problem doing that. And so in the same way, we always give these coaches, kudos for being able to take in players who maybe have a history and kind of turn it where you don't see those issues on the field. We always give them props for that. But now all of a sudden, when it's, your team or a coach you might like or whatever, it's it's got to cut both ways. And so to me, obviously, look, Sirianni, it's not entirely his fault, but when you lead when you lead as an immature leader, you cannot expect maturity out of the people you lead. And so, yeah, that's all I got to say about that. Could have seriously cost the Eagles, so we'll have to see. Obviously, with him out, hopefully not hopefully, but should be a better showing this week from them with him back. Last thing with the Eagles, man. Look, Tank Bigsby acquired for a couple draft picks. Look, I'm usually full on Team Howie. I think there's very few moves he's ever made that I don't agree with and don't love, and I feel like typically he gets the better end of a trade. I don't quite understand what the thought is with the Tank Bigsby acquisition. Running the ball is not something that not something I thought we needed help with. And so to give up a couple draft picks and solid draft picks to acquire, a guy who might be a kind of half rotational third down back just doesn't make sense to me. He's a guy who's not really great in pass protection, not really great catching the ball, and solid runner, but again, I just don't think that was an area of need. I would have liked to see those draft picks go somewhere in the secondary or anywhere on that defense, man. So, but look, at the end of the day, It's all about getting out of there with a win. And so Eagles win over the Cowboys. Again, maybe the Cowboys are just better than we thought. Maybe they've made a big shift as far as that run game, and maybe that defense is a lot better than we thought. But to me, again, I don't think so. I think it was a very bad showing from the Eagles, and something that definitely needs to turn around if we're looking to get back to that Super Bowl at. Next one, man. Look, we're going to stay with the Super Bowl from last year, Chiefs and Chargers, man. So what a game, what a game. Look, Chargers, phenomenal game. Justin Herbert, phenomenal game. Probably the best game he's played in his career, maybe his life. And so look, just starting with that, man. I think what we saw, look, I did not expect the Chargers to come out and run the type of offense they did, really letting Herbert sling the ball. I thought we were going to get a lot of power running, and I think that's what the Chiefs thought from how that defense looked as well. And so, Chargers, man, I would say again, you still have the questions on Herbert with when it comes to playoff time, right? We've seen him with one of the worst collapses in the playoff game ever. But I think with a win like this, with a coach like that in Harbaugh, if Justin Herbert can really kind of figure it out this season, I mean, this is a team that, and again, it's tough because week one we really don't know what every team is, right? Is it a bad showing from the Chiefs defense for 1 week? Is it a bad showing from the Chiefs for 1 week? Is it just an apparition game from the Chargers for a week? And especially when you're talking about a neutral site game in another country, it's just, it does throw in a lot of variables. But what I will say is I was very impressed by the Chargers. And I think, again, I think any team that's coached by Harbaugh, you don't want to see in a playoff situation, especially with a quarterback that's talented like that, if he can figure it out. And what we've seen from Harbaugh is he can definitely help quarterbacks figure it out. And look, on the other side, man, Chiefs, man. Look, you lose Worthy right out the gate of the game. I think that kind of throws a wrench. It seemed like from all the reports coming into this year, Worthy was kind of going to be that number one option. So you got to think they had a lot of that first script written up for him, a lot of plays that were going to be designed to get him the ball and game planned around getting him the ball coming into this game. And when you lose a guy that early, it's tough because now you're kind of on the fly trying to kind of remake your whole offensive game plan. But yeah, it's never looked like they really got into a really great rhythm. I mean, Hollywood Brown had some really big plays. Mahomes did some, Mahomes stuff with just making plays out of nothing that you just kind of scratch your head wondering how he did it. But I think obviously now down Worthy, you're already missing Rasheed. It's again, I think they came into the season wanting to really air the ball out, and I think this game and kind of moving forward until they get Worthy back, I think you're probably going to see a lot of the old Chiefs as far as like we're just going to try to gut out wins and hope that we can get our guy the ball with a chance to win it at the end. And they had a chance to do that, man. And Chris Jones, phenomenal player, going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, but you get you go for a hero play to try to really kind of make a big time play to get the ball back, ends up not in your favor and seals the game. So look, the Chiefs, as bad as they looked, you got to look at it as they still had a chance to go out and win that game at the end. Again, I've gotten to the point where if Mahomes has the ball with one drive to go win a game, I'm going to assume he's winning it. And so to play as bad as they did, and for the Chargers to look as great as they did and play a phenomenal game, and it's still be in the balance at the end there, you're not happy about it if you're the Chiefs, but again, it's it's not as bad of a loss as it could have been. And look, if there's any team that I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to, it's the team that's been to the last 3 Super Bowls and won 2 of the last 3, and like, you know, something like 3 of the last 5 or whatever it is. So, yeah, they're just going to get the benefit of the doubt from me for a bad showing in week 1. I can't judge them in the regular season, at least not this early. Excuse me. All right, man. Next, Bengals and Browns, man. Look, a game that, let's be honest, the Bengals, very fortunate to get out of. You are outgained all game, less first downs, terrible offensively, and to give up that many yards to a Browns team that, is at this point projected to be one of the worst in the league, that's a tough one. And so, again, great to get a win out of that, especially if you're the Bengals when you're used to, starting the season with losses on games like that. You got to be happy with a win, but look at I think it's something that, you try to move around your whole off season to avoid a slow start, and then to come out like that with that showing in week 1. Again, I don't have the Bengals as a playoff team, and I feel better now about them not making the playoffs than I did coming in. And so, yeah, I think that is a team that I would definitely keep my eyes on as far as underwhelming this year again. Next, man, Packers and Lions, man. So, look, Packers absolutely handled Lions, and we're obviously going to get to them with their week 2 game that was last night. But I think the question now has to become, we'll touch on that when we talk about them later. But from a Lions point of view, man, I said it coming into the season. I was a little bit worried. I still thought, look, I kind of mapped it out as far as wins, losses throughout their schedule. Still had them in the playoffs. I still had them as I think I had them in second place in that division, but was hesitant about a lot of it because of the loss of the OC and the DC. Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn leaving. And man, if you watch that game, again, it may just be that the Packers are just that team and, that much better. I don't think that's the case. But when you watch that Lions team, man, it looks like a totally different team. The offense looks totally different, doesn't look as explosive or creative. The old line doesn't look as good. That defense doesn't look as good. And so I think there is real look, as somebody who had them finishing second in that division, I'm skeptical of them now and skeptical of kind of where I have them in that division. And I think that, again, like I said, maybe the Packers are just that good, but I think the Lions, man, could be a team that we are shocked at how underwhelming they are this year. And look, Dan Campbell said it a couple years ago after a playoff game that, when they made, I think it was the conference championship, he said, yo, you don't get it. These chances don't come around too often. This might be the only time we get here. And it's looking like after week 1, that he may be correct. And that might have been their only chance to make a Super Bowl. And it just goes to show you, like, look, I know, we all watch football and we see the Chiefs and they're always in the Super Bowl, and the Eagles are always, in a couple of the last 3. And so we see these teams that are constantly in the mix, and we think, okay, well, these teams are always going to be in the mix. And it's just simply, for some teams, it's just not the case. And so I think the Lions, man, it may be kind of getting dark early there, and we may see like a drop off. Like I said, that again, then I don't like it as far as from a I like to be right about what I pick and what I say, but that's my fear looking at that game. Next, man, we got the Ravens and the Bills. So look, Ravens Bills, man, absolutely incredible game. Absolutely incredible game. Fun to watch. Great great game. Obviously, two ways to look at this again. Josh Allen putting on that, that Superman cape and coming to the rescue. And then you also got the other side, man. Ravens dropping another game where they were leading big. And a game that they shouldn't have lost, and a game to a conference rival, a team that you are more than likely going to have to get through to make the Super Bowl. And so, coming out of this, man, is one of the things I'll say that shot me that I saw this week is Harbaugh being, since I think it's like over the last like 30 years, has the most double-digit losses when up by double digits in a game. And from a team and a coach that, is viewed in the way he is, and rightfully so, it's very odd that you would have so many games that you are up big that you should win that you end up losing. And this goes for Lamar too, man. Like, it just seems like the Ravens, and I mean, it's tough. You start last year against the Chiefs and you lose right at the end. You start this week against the Bills and, you have this big lead and you end up giving it up. And it's just, you obviously last two seasons start against tough competition. But again, these are teams that you're going to have to beat to get in the playoff, to get to the Super Bowl. And for whatever reason, the Ravens, man, look, when they're playing a mid-tier NFC team, they look like the greatest team ever. But you get them in big games, whether it's a playoff or whether it's, again, against a conference rival that, is also at the top of the conference. For whatever reason, man, they tend to do things like this where it's just losing games you shouldn't. And to me, it's one of the things I go back to. I've always been skeptical of Lamar in the playoffs. And when you have showings like this where it's against another great team and you find ways to lose, that just shows me that the moment gets a little too much for you. And so, again, I think, now do I think the Ravens are in trouble? Absolutely not. You know what? I think that, again, like last year, they lost their first two and still ran away that last year. And I think they're probably still going to be a 12-win team, 13-win team maybe, and cruise to the playoffs. And I think there's going to be a stretch of 8 weeks, 9 weeks where we're probably like, wow, the Ravens are unbeatable and are clearly the Super Bowl favorites, just like we've had last year, and maybe not the year before, but one of the last year and another year over the last couple of years where, we just look at them dominate and we say, well, how could that team not be the favorite? And the answer is they do what they always do when we say that and end up falling flat in the playoffs. And so to me, that's going to be the thing with them. Again, they're just another team where I'm like, I really don't care about your regular season. You come in with what was voted as the most talented roster in the league and all the talent, but you got to finish games, and it's just something they have a problem doing, especially in big games. And then on the other side, man, look, Bills and Josh Allen, look, can't take anything away from him. MVP last year, comes out, and that's how he follows up his MVP, and probably the leader for the MVP this year now after, week one, for what that's worth. However, that Bills team does not look great. And look, I was a big Keon Coleman fan and thought he could have a really, really big year. He does not look like he's taken that next step this year. And so while, look, Josh Allen putting on the Superman cape and doing that, while incredible to watch, I think I have less faith in the Bills after that win because I don't think that that is a sustainable way to win games in big games and in the playoffs. And so, can you get through a round, maybe 2 rounds doing that? Absolutely. But for me, I just can't see you having to have these all-time one-man performances 4 times in a playoff game, 4 times in playoff games and big games to win a Super Bowl. To me, that's just not feasible. And so, unless, like I said, it's great that they got the win, but to me, it much less faith because I don't think you can do that consistently and win against good teams. And so, I think it's just that Bills team is a lot more vulnerable than I think people are going to believe after week 1 and probably after week 2 because I can't see them losing this week either. I think they play the Jets. I think that's going to be a win. But like I said, it's just I think Josh Allen band-aids a lot of problems for that Bills team. And I mean, look, the Ravens hung up 40 on them. That's a problem. I know the Ravens are great, but any team giving you 40 is that your defense has some issues. And so I still think defense has issues for the Bills. I think their offense is less talented than I think people thought coming in. So again, I just think looking at that game, I have less faith in the Bills, more faith in them not making a deep run and not making the Super Bowl. And look, the last one we're going to go over from last week, Vikings Bears, man. So this game, look, hurt me. It hurt me as somebody who likes Caleb, likes Ben Johnson, thought that pairing could really do some damage this year. Not a great first game for them. And look, they came out. Caleb started great. There's a lot of quick stuff, getting the ball out. They mentioned in the broadcast it was, Ben Johnson's just been preaching completions, and that's what they're doing. And it was, it was running smoothly-ish. I mean, not a ton of points out of it, but moving the ball, completions, and, Caleb had a really nice hot start. However, man, look, that Brian Flores defense figured it out, and to go from such a hot start where you didn't miss a pass to then finishing the way Caleb did. Look, I think Caleb is supremely talented. And we saw it, man. There was a throw where he rolled out and made a pass down the sideline that was on an absolute laser, one of the best passes I've seen. And, that's why you draft him, because he's got that talent upside. However, you could see it from an attitude perspective, and not saying he's got a bad attitude, but he can clearly kind of get in his own head, get frustrated, and then now maybe it was just the Brian Flores defense that completely just coming out of that halftime just absolutely baffled him, Ben Johnson. But it's no mistake that he missed an easy pass, got visibly frustrated, and then from then on it was just, not great for him moving forward, and got really bad for him moving forward. And that just, again, kind of snowballs from a fact of you miss a pass, you get frustrated. Now you've missed 3 passes, you get more and more frustrated, and you can see him visibly frustrated. And so for me, his next step is obviously, one is just getting more comfortable in the pocket. And that's just going to come as, Ben Johnson. Hopefully that'll come as Ben Johnson really gets that into him. But more than anything, man, when you look at great quarterbacks, I'm talking, Brady's, Peyton Manning, Mahomes, um, guys like that, which Caleb absolutely has the talent to be in that category. Obviously, he has to do some winning, has to start getting it together. But from a talent perspective, Aaron Rodgers, from a talent perspective, he's in that kind of class. But what you see from all those guys is maturity. They might get frustrated over something, but you never see that carryover. And that's got to be the step for Caleb is getting to a point where, it's as a basketball player, it's, you don't stop shooting just because you missed something. You have to have that next shot mentality. Same thing with Caleb, man. It's getting to that point of, yeah, I can be frustrated, but you gotta have a quick memory. Be frustrated for a second, get over it, and you gotta lock back in. And that's just what it is. And I think that's a step where Caleb is legitimately lacking and needs to grow more moving forward. And on the other side, man, Kevin O'Connell. Look, the Vikings, tough start for JJ McCarthy. Look, I'll be honest with you. I loved it. As somebody who was very skeptical of JJ McCarthy coming in, it looked like I was going to take 10 or 15 victory laps on that one. And look, credit to him. He came out and started dealing in that second half, made big plays, and that offense started humming. And look, it's Kevin O'Connell. I mean, depending on how you view JJ McCarthy is going to depend on how you view Kevin O'Connell. And so, look, I think moving off Sam Darnold and looking at Darnold, how he played in week 1, really solidified the fact of Kevin O'Connell is just one of those guys like a Shanahan, like a McVay, where you can give him, if you give him C plus starting quarterback, B minus starting quarterback, his offense is going to look A plus, as long as that quarterback can get the ball where it needs to be. And so I think that game, and I think moving forward, we'll see, obviously we'll see what Sam Darnold ends up looking like. And we'll see what JJ ends up looking like. But to me, it's just, I think Kevin O'Connell has really started to separate himself and put himself in that category of the McVays, the Shanahans, where you give him competent quarterback play and that offense is a problem. And so I think, look, we'll have to see how it plays out. But I think after 1 week, he's more than validated in moving off Sam Darnold, which, again, I hate to say it. Like I said, I mean, if y'all watched last year, I thought this should have been a trade JJ, pay Sam Darnold conversation. And look, it looks like Kevin O'Connell is definitely a little bit more knowledgeable on what kind of quarterback he needs than me. But again, I just, I think the more, if this offense can continue to look like it did in that second half, I think, again, he kind of puts himself in a different category of the coaches, puts himself in that top 5 coach in the league category. And so, look, that's going to wrap it up for week 1, man. As far as our kind of recaps on it. Next, man, we're going to look at week 2. And look, we're going to start. I said we want to talk about them later. Packers and Commanders, man. So we're going to talk about the Commanders side first because I do want to take some time on the Packers. And so from the Commanders side, look, I think, I think after week 1, it was maybe a little overhyped on how the defense looked and how that offense looked. And so going up against a team, I believe they played the Giants week 1, but going up against a team like that, where a Giants team where we're thinking, okay, like, their offense isn't going to be great, but it's not going to be abysmal. And their defense is really, really good and can keep them in some games. And so I think when you look at the Commanders this week playing against a team that, like the Packers, who are looking as dominant as they are, you really see that the Commanders are still a little ways away from being true contenders. That defense is still a little bit away from being a true contender. I think um, the secondary, Marshawn Lattimore, clearly not what he used to be. And they mentioned on the broadcast, you go from being a shutdown corner to being picked on every play. And that's that's a guy they were coming into this season hoping was going to be a big time defensive player for them. And so couple that with the fact, offense couldn't really get anything going. That pass rush was giving them issues. And we're going to talk about some more with that and Micah Parsons. But look, the O-line, the rookie they have on the right side, he was having a tough game all night. He had a tough first game, had a tough second game. And so they definitely need to figure that O-line out. And look, the Commanders, man, again, it's, a little different because your quarterback is so young. You're talking about a guy in his second year. You've already been so far in the playoffs with that. It's not quite the same as the Lions where, you don't know if you're going to get there again. But it just shows you, man, it's tough. You lose Austin Eckler. Looks like he's going to be out for the year for sure. Lost another key player, I think, on the defense who looks like he's going to be out for the rest of the year. And it just shows you, man, like, you have a great year. Last year, you're looking to kind of, keep that rolling. And look, it comes at you fast, and injuries, can hit you, and it can be a serious thing. You trade away Brian Robinson thinking like we got Austin Eckler, we got Bill Krosky. I can't remember the second part, but Jacory, who wants to be called Bill, you're thinking, okay, we got these two backs. We don't need Brian Robinson. And now you're looking like Jacory's going to be kind of pushed into probably a starting role, a lot more carries, a lot more touches. And now, your back, your third string is your backup. And so definitely looks like they could be in a little trouble moving forward. Again, I think they're going to be fine. You have Debo, you do have Terry McLaurin still. You've got Jaden Daniels back there. He's still going to be dealing. But it's just, I wouldn't be surprised to see them. I think I had them near, fighting with the Eagles for the top of the division. After seeing this week, I think there's clearly a separation between them and a true contender. And so, look, we're going to talk about Packers now, man, and just absolutely dominant in 2 games. And like I said, just when you're looking at true contenders, I think now you have to put the Packers in there. With that addition of Micah Parsons, a guy who, look, if you were to look at his stat line, you'd think he had a very pedestrian game. I'm here to tell you, if I watched that game, it was anything but pedestrian. Micah Parsons looks like a man on a mission right now. From, there was a play early in the game where he got double teamed on the line, and they brought the back over to help block him, and he bullied through the 2 linemen and the running back and got the pressure, forced Jaden Daniels out the pocket to a bad pass, I believe. But it was like that all game. All game, he was living in the backfield. Didn't matter who they put in front of him, how many guys they put in front of him. He was living in the backfield. And when you have a guy like Micah Parsons who's causing that much chaos for your offense, that defense now becomes so much better, because now you're not having to, as a DB, you're not having to hold up for 3-4 seconds. All you have to do is hold it for 1 or 2, makes your job a lot easier. Those other linemen who, now you're going to get single blocking on you because they're going to bring a double team to Micah. So it makes your job a lot easier, which is good. So just that addition of Micah, to me, I would not be shocked to see, the Packers be a top 1-2 defense in the league, because they already had so much talent on that defense, and now you add a guy like Micah Parsons, it just makes everybody so much better. And on the other end, man, look, Jordan Love, I was talking to somebody about this the other day. I think that legitimately, if Jordan Love does not turn the ball over, I do not think the Packers can lose. I think they have so much talent on that team right now. Got a ton of wide receivers, um, who are B plus wide receivers. We'll have to see what their rookie looks like. He's had a slow start, but that he's a guy who looks like he could eventually be a number one receiver. You got Josh Jacobs running the ball. Offensive line looks really good. I think, to me, the only way the Packers can lose, like legitimately lose games, is if Jordan Love gives the games away. And look, it's the one it's the one reason I've been so hesitant to pick the Packers prior to this season and even this season, and even to kind of mark them as a true contender, because I don't think you can be a true contender with a quarterback who is prone to giving games away more regularly than I think any other quarterback in the league. And so, to me, I think, look, he had a couple throws last night that, could have swung the game. Thankfully, they didn't. Um, but I think if you're Matt LaFleur, the driving point to Jordan Love has got to be, you cannot turn the ball over. Because if you do not turn the ball over, our defense is not going to get beat more times than our offense is going to beat the other team's defense. And so I legitimately think if Jordan Love can figure out how to cut down on those turnovers and figure out how to play a legitimate full season of good to great quarterback, it that Packers team could be heading for the Super Bowl. And I know we're only in week 2, but to watch them dominate in the way they dominated these last 2 games is just, and to look at how they're doing it and the talent they have, it would not shock me to see them in the Super Bowl. And I think right now they'd probably be, again, it's tough with Jordan Love, but I think they'd probably be, they've got to be the top of the NFC as far as what a Super Bowl contender would look like. Next, man, look, we're going to go into our look ahead for this week. And so we got a couple games that we're going to take a look at. A couple games that I think are going to be worth watching. One of them is probably going to surprise you, maybe 2, but I think 2 of them are just obvious, and I think we're all going to be watching regardless. And so, look, we're going to start off with the Lions and Bears. And so this one's pretty obvious. Look, you got Ben Johnson coming back to the Lions. You've got 2 teams that, 0-1 looking for a win. One team that looked like they were kind of clicking on all cylinders coming out in that first half, and then tale of 2 teams before and after halftime. And then you got the Lions, who just thoroughly dominated. And for a team like the Lions, with kind of what we've become accustomed to seeing from them, I would expect them to come out with bad intentions. And so, look, I think the big question here is got to be, who does a win mean more for? Who's more desperate for a win? And to me, I think it's got to be the Lions, right? I think obviously the Bears, if they lose, it's going to be, oh boy, did they make the wrong pick? How did Caleb look? You're going to deal with that. But I think, barring them just looking abysmal all year, look, it's first year of Ben Johnson, second year Caleb there, first year of this marriage of, head coach and quarterback. It's going to be a process. And I know, look, I'm guilty of it. I've tried to kind of microwave the Bears into contention last year and this year. But I think even with that, you have wiggle room of, it's brand new, right? It's going to take time. So while I think I'd love to see the Bears, and I do think there is going to be more scrutiny on them than is deserved for a team in their situation. I think that ultimately, you know, the Bears having a bad season or a mediocre season isn't as dire as the Lions. I think the Lions, if you come out and start 0-2 with the offense not looking great, both in division games, the defense not looking great, and look, Dan Campbell after week one, little testy as far as reporters when he was being asked about why the offense doesn't look the same. I think that spells, there's some tension in that locker room and in that organization. And so I think if you come out and you lose to the Packers, okay, understandable. I mean, granted, you got dominated, but you come out and you lose to Caleb Williams and the Bears, especially of how they looked after in that second half. I think it's going to be emergency bells, all hands on deck. This could kind of be spiraling for the Lions, and I think it would show just how much they miss those coordinators. And also, I think it puts a spotlight on Dan Campbell because, look, as much as I like Dan Campbell, I think he's perfect for that team, that city. It really kind of points to coaches who are more like motivator coaches than, you know, kind of offensive, defensive whiz kids, right? So you got like the Shanahans, the Kevin O'Connells, the McVays, um, even, the D'Amicos, guys like that. And look, Saleh, when he was with the Jets, say what you want about him, the defense was always great. And now he's gone, looks a little different. But I think, you look at guys like that and it's like, okay, that one side of the ball is always going to be good. Doesn't matter what the personnel looks like. Their side of the ball will always play above what they have. The downside to a coach like Dan Campbell, who comes in and sets this great culture and really allows this team to kind of be who it's become, the downside to that is when you lose your Ben Johnson and your Aaron Glenn, it really puts a spotlight on how much it hurts that you do not have a coach that is a kind of genius on his side of the ball. And so it forces you into this. You need to have, with a coach like Dan Campbell, I think Sirianni kind of falls into this too. You need to have a great situation for them to kind of thrive in, which is you need great coordinators, you need great rosters, and then they can kind of galvanize that group into a higher level. But it also just makes you so much more susceptible to bad seasons if everything isn't a great situation for you. And so I think, the Lions, it's tough to be a must-win game in week 2. But I mean, if you lose, like I said, to this Bears team in the state that it looked after last game, that is major red flags moving forward and definitely something I think to worry about. All right, next is going to be, I think, one of the ones that's going to shock us as far as a game I think could really be interesting is Ravens-Browns. And so, look, we saw what the obviously both these teams did. Ravens put up 40, also gave up 40. And the Browns, look, as bad as the Bengals defense is and was last year, they gave up a lot of yards to the Browns, and the Browns went and got a lot of yards and had more than enough chances to go out and win that game. The Ravens defense doesn't look like it's, this juggernaut defensive unit. And as they've shown us, no lead is too big for them. Or no lead is big enough for them. And so I think this is clearly a game. But look, we saw it last year. Ravens go out and they lose to the Chiefs. Next thing you know, they're up double digits on the Raiders and end up losing that game. And so could I see a total repeat of that here? Absolutely. Look, Lamar, he's, I think, 500 in his career against the Browns. Hit one of the worst passer ratings he has against any other team. And that Browns defense is good. I mean, we all assume that the Bengals are going to be an incredible offense again this year. Um, a lot of people have them in the playoffs, and it's not because their defense got better. It's because of that offense. And the Browns shut down that offense. So obviously we'll see what they can do against this Ravens team, but I think that game could be a really, really interesting game and end up being a kind of shocking outcome possibly. Now, I would say I'm still picking the Ravens. However, it would not shock me to see them go down to the Browns and start this season 0-2 again. So I am picking the Ravens here, though. But again, I think it's going to be a more interesting and closer game than maybe people really think. And also, so to go back on it, with the Lions and Bears, I am going with the Bears in that game as well. Look, next up, we got the Bengals and Jags, another game where I'm like, maybe a little surprising that I would have on here. Oh, look, I'm very high on the Jags this year. I think Trevor Lawrence, with that receiving core, looks like, Travis Etienne is going to, I don't think he's going to be what he was in week one. I think right now he's on pace for like 2,700 yards or something like that. I don't think that's going to be the case. But I do think, if they can figure that out with the new coaching, I think they have a legitimate chance to be a playoff team this year and a team that makes some noise. And look, the Bengals, again, we'll have to see what it is, but with that defense, I think the Jags can put up some points. I think the Jags offense is a lot better than the Browns offense, and we saw what the Browns offense light up that Bengals team. And so I think this is a big time prove it year for the Jags and for Trevor Lawrence specifically. And so I think he needs to go out and really have a big game against the Bengals. And that Bengals team, man, we got to see what it looks like when, if that was truly just the Browns defense, or if it is like they just cannot figure out these early games and it's really going to end up costing them. And so with that, man, look, I'm going Jags on this one. I think the Jags take this win. I think alarm bells in Cincinnati after a 1-1 start just kind of sounds Cincinnati to me. And so, but yeah, I think that could be a really good game as well. I think we could definitely see some really big numbers in that game also. And then last, man, we're going to finish it. Obviously, you know where it is. You know what we're doing. You know what the game of the week is. We are going Eagles and Chiefs. And so with this one, man, it's just so obviously rematch of the Super Bowl and a very lopsided Super Bowl at that. And so I think the big question here is I think Vegas has it at a 1.5 point spread for the Eagles, which in Kansas City, I don't know. I feel like I know what we saw in the Super Bowl. But what I'll say is, as I was watching the Super Bowl, when we went into halftime, I think I text, a good amount of my friends who are Eagles fans and said that Sweat was the MVP as of the first half. And I stand by that. I think that his dominance in that pass rush was just so great, and it set the tone so much that it then forced the Kansas City, had to start pressing, and that's when you really saw, really the flaws in that Kansas City team. And look, it's the recipe against Kansas City has always been if you can rush 4 and get to the quarterback, you have a good chance of you have a chance of winning. It's what we saw Tampa Bay do to them in the Super Bowl, and it's exactly what Philly did. The problem is a lot of those guys that were big in the Super Bowl are gone now. And so it's tough because Obviously, a lot of those guys are gone. But when you look at Kansas City's side, man, where she's out, looks like Xavier Worthy's not going to play. Really, really hinders as far as the weapons they have in Kansas City. So I think this game is going to be a lot closer than the Super Bowl. I think you're going to see a lot more offense from Kansas City than you saw in the Super Bowl and than you saw in Week 1, because I don't know that I trust Philly to get to Mahomes with 4. And so if they do need to start bringing the blitz, Mahomes is one of the best passers in the league against the blitz. And on the other side, man, look, Jalen had a monster game 1. And if there's one thing, like I said, I think he's incredible for Philadelphia. I think he's the perfect quarterback for them. Obviously, there's the questions of him passing and things like that, but there's one thing that I'd never question about Jalen, and it's that, look, he has games against Kansas City. He plays well against Kansas City. And so, I think we saw a sellout on the run in the Super Bowl. I think you'll probably see that again. I can't see Kansas City switching it up to focus on, we're going to try to take Jalen out of the game. I still think the best way for Philly to win is Saquon Barkley dominating, because it just opens up everything else. I know a lot of the talk has been around A.J. Brown not getting a catch. Or one catch, no catches. I think he had one target, no catches. Or one, whatever it was. Very little targets, very little catches, A.J. Brown. And I know the talk has been, okay, well, is he going to force it? I just don't see Jalen being that kind of player, being that kind of leader. So I don't think they're going to worry about that. And I think Kansas City's really going to focus on stopping that running attack. And if Jalen beats him, Jalen beats him. Obviously, we have the weapons in Philly where we can do that. But I do think that is the best way to beat the Eagles. If I was, an opposing team, that'd be what I would say. But I do think this game goes very differently than it did in the Super Bowl, just because the way the Eagles dominated, I don't think they can dominate like that again. And if they can't dominate in that way against Kansas City specifically, I think that opens up a lot of things for Kansas City. And so I do think we're looking at a closer game. As far as who the win means more for, I would say right now, again, it's tough because I don't think it's a big win for either team. It's big in a sense of, like, it gives them a win over that other team that, you possibly win the Super Bowl. I think if you're the Eagles, a win kind of shows, like, yeah, this team, we aren't scared of them. We can beat them. We do beat them. If you're the Chiefs, a win is, okay, hey, we, kind of get back from the Super Bowl. And we also show that missing our 2 best weapons on offense outside of the quarterback, we can still go out and beat dominant teams. But as far as from a moving forward standpoint, so where I look at like the Ravens, or if I look at let's say the Bengals is a better example, or the Lions. I think the Lions with a loss or the Bengals with a loss kind of spells trouble for the rest of the year. I think if the Eagles or the Chiefs, whoever wins, whoever loses this game, it's not going to, it doesn't mean too much to me moving forward, just because if the Chiefs go down 0-2, again, it's like I said, they've been to 3 of the last 4 Super Bowls, 2 of the last 3. It's hard for me to panic on a team going 0-2 who's shown that much dominance and who's been through adversity. Again, I believe even down 0-2, they're going to figure it out. They're going to get it right. They got probably the best coach in the game, for sure the best quarterback in the game, and, reinforcements on the way. And Mahomes has just shown that he can figure it out until he gets those guys back. And so they could start 0-2. I still think they're going to finish, top of that division. They'll be Super Bowl contenders. They're going to be in the mix. Doesn't kind of put a panic in me at all about them. And from the Eagles' point of view, if they lose, you're 1-1. You lost to a team. Again, I don't think there's, outside of the Packers, some like dominant team that, or a team that I look at as like extremely dominant. And I think the Eagles still, with as with even with my questions on their pass rush ability and their secondary, I still think talent wise, that offense has probably got more talent than any offense in the league. And they're good in spots defensively where as the season goes on, if some of these new guys can kind of step up and figure it out, they'll be able to get wins while they're trying to figure it out. So again, doesn't really, I don't think I'm swayed either way by a win or a loss. I know everybody wants to say, oh, if Kansas City loses, it's panic time. Look, man, you got Mahomes, you got Andy Reid, you got championship DNA. It's panic time is your 0-5, 0-4. That's panic time. Panic 0-2 against, a division rival in a weird game and, a Super Bowl rematch. I don't care how it looks, not panic time. And so with that game, I think it's a go either way game. I'm going to pick the Chiefs. I think they have a little bit more motivation. And I think the Eagles, again, like I said, the way they dominated the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, I don't think they have the personnel to dominate that way again. And I think in a close game, I trust Andy Reid and Mahomes in a close game over anybody in the league. And so, but again, I think this is a one score, like 3-point game. And it could go either way. I really think it's a toss up game. I'm like 51-49 on the Chiefs winning it. So, but look, I think it's gonna be a great game. I'm looking forward to watching all these games. And I think we're in for a really fun week 2 of football. And so, look, that's a wrap for me here, y'all. Look, as always, I appreciate y'all. Look, go like, subscribe, interact with our social media, man. Subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Yeah, man. Again, I appreciate y'all. Enjoy football this week, and we'll catch y'all next week.